Hi everybody, I'm Peter Sciarra, aka Stations Guy, and my guest on today's show is the legendary, the one and only Sharp RP-117 both sides play turntable. Now, much has been written about this engineering marvel, much has been video recorded about it. You'll find a number of videos on YouTube. My focus on today's show is going to be replacing the plastic gear inside that's responsible for deploying the tray and retracting it, as well as replacing both of the styli, or styluses as you may prefer, because this does take two, one here and one down here below. And as far as I know, I've scoured videos on YouTube. I have never seen the styluses being replaced on a video on YouTube. I wanted to try and see that before I dove into it, and I couldn't find one. So I think this may be the first time it's ever been done on YouTube. And confessedly, I did make a couple of stupid blunders, and I hope you'll learn from those. So if you ever decide to dive in on those projects, if you have one or get one, you'll learn from my mistakes and you won't give yourself a minor heart attack like I did here. This came out in the early 80s, around 1983, 1984. It utilizes what Sharp called both sides play technology. So there's a tone arm and a cartridge and stylus here, which plays side A, the top of the record. Then down below, there's a second tone arm, cartridge and stylus that plays side B underneath the record. So thereby eliminating the need to have to flip the record. And you can select side A or B. You can program the tracks and select direct tracks. It's got this very cool display here. And the reason it's able to do that is it has both cartridges have an infrared beam that scans the record, and then there's an optical sensor that gets the reflection and can tell the spaces in between the tracks. And it can be a bit slow, it can be a bit hokey sometimes in terms of the accuracy, but for the most part, it works. I would say this is mid to low end. It certainly is not high end. If you're looking for a high end, fantastic sounding turntable, this probably is not for you. It comes with a hardwired RCA cable. It's hardwired to the back. So if you have a nicer, higher quality RCA cable you want to use, you can't really use it because this is hardwired. There was another version of this called the RP, I think it was the 107, and instead of the RCA cable, it came with a 8-pin DIN connection, which you could use to connect to other Sharp products that had the DIN input, like a Sharp receiver or what have you. And then if you turn around and wanted to connect it to something else that didn't have the DIN input, you'd have to get a special cable that had a DIN on one end and the dual RCA on the other. Sharp really exploited their both sides play technology through a range of other models. They had a stereo system, a sort of shelf system, I guess you could call it, 2 speakers, an upright turntable with a both sides play technology, AM/FM tuner, and a cassette deck. That was the VZ3000 and 3500. My understanding is they're very, very difficult to work on. They also had, believe it or not, a boombox from the 80s that had a built-in turntable, upright turntable with the both sides play technology. It was the VZ2000 and later on the VZ2. You'll find those occasionally on eBay, although a lot of them most of the time aren't working, the turntables. There was an RP-207, which was kind of the later version after this, which I've read is a little bit easier to work on, but I don't think it looks quite as nice. Probably the main competitor to this was the Sansui PL95R, which kind of looks and sounds a bit sort of computerish or video game-ish, doesn't have this nice display. It only has one tone arm. It does the both sides play, which they can't call it that because that was a Sharp thing, but it has only one tone arm. So the tone arm actually does a UE. It does a U-turn, so it'll play the top. If you want it to play the bottom, it rotates down and goes underneath the record. From what I've read, it's really unreliable, very, very sensitive. So, if someone has one for sale and they say it's working, probably by the time you get it, it probably won't be working, or not every part of it. So interesting technology, kind of sensitive. This plays 33 and 45 RPM, 7-inch and 12-inch. I don't know if it plays 10-inch. I don't have a 10-inch record, but it'll do those two formats. Won't play flexi-discs. It will play colored vinyl, transparent vinyl, picture discs, but not using the track programming buttons, because the sensor can't read that information on those kind of discs. So you can play it. You can just press play and it'll play the album normally. But you can't take advantage of the other technology with those kind of discs. And even regular albums, regular black vinyl albums, sometimes it can get a little bit confused. It can be delayed. There's a muting circuit so that when the tone arm comes down, it mutes a little bit of the audio. Sometimes that cuts into the beginning of the song. So it's got its quirks, but it's convenient. It brings sort of CD features to a record album, which is interesting. It's linear tracking, so it follows it straight across the record. Some people feel linear tracking is more accurate playback. They're kind of expensive. You don't see them all that often on eBay and other sites, but when you do, they're up there. They're several $100s, even for ones that aren't working. It can cost you. But my advice would be, if you're going to buy one that is working, make sure the person packs it very well, because these are sensitive. And make sure they insert the transport screws. There are 2 screws that go in the bottom here that lock everything in place. And it's really important, if this thing's going to be shipped, I think, that they ship with the transport screws in them. 2 impressions I got, or maybe 2 assumptions I made from watching a bunch of videos of this model on YouTube. One was, I thought it was lightweight, because this front piece is plastic, the back piece is plastic, the tray is plastic, and I thought, well, this thing probably, you could lift it up with a finger. Well, no, it's actually about 15.5 pounds. It's got some heft to it. You need 2 hands and a good grip to lift this. It definitely has some weight to it. The other impression I had was that this thing was huge. It just seemed to look big. Like they say, when you're on television, you look fatter, like me. This looked bigger to me. But actually, in reality, it's not that much bigger than the sleeve of a record album. Okay, so there you go there. And there you go there. It's not that much bigger than a record, which, is interesting, because it just seemed to look a lot bigger to me. What else can I tell you about this? It has various features. Obviously, as I said, you can select side A or side B. You can do repeat. You can program the tracks. You can select direct tracks. It's kind of funny, because with this off, with the display off, and I guess you can kind of see the circles there. But even so, if someone not familiar with this, and maybe quite a bit of a person, quite a younger person than me, might look at this and say, what is this thing? Is it an old video game box? Is it an old cable box? It kind of, in some ways, looks like a Laserdisc player. And in some ways, it looks like a VCR, like you want to just take a VCR tape and push it in here. But it's not a CD player, not any of those things. It is a turntable. And by the way, I think, anyway, my definition, I think there's a difference between turntable and record player, in my mind. To my mind, a record player has built-in speakers, so you can play the record and you'll hear it on the same unit. A turntable does not have any speakers. You have to hook it up to something in order to hear it. A stereo system, powered speakers with a phono input, whatever. So I call this a turntable. You need to hook it up to something to hear it. Doesn't have a headphone jack, doesn't have an amplifier, doesn't have a phono preamp. So I'll be kind of playing with this a little later on in the video, but what the footage I want to roll right now is me explaining the underside, taking it apart, and then getting into the nitty-gritty of replacing the plastic cogwheel and the 2 styluses. So and then after that, I'll come back on and we'll kind of do a wrap up. So I hope this helps you. That's why I videoed it. And we'll go from there. So let's roll it. So a few things I want to point out before I start to take this apart. One is this is the feet. These are the feet that this came with, the standard feet. There's not much to them at all. They're very thin and not very tall. So I wanted something that was going to give me more isolation and also lift the unit up off a bit more so there'd be more airflow. This does get a little bit warm. Not crazy, but it can get a little bit warm. So it'd be nice to have more space in between the surface that you're putting this on. So I bought these aftermarket feet. They're called Isolate It. I bought them on Amazon. They got fairly good reviews. They're just simply peel and stick. I didn't want to be screwing into it. So you just peel off the top. There's a 3M adhesive. And they do the job nicely. They do lift it off a bit more for more airflow. They're good for isolation. There's a problem, though, which is not listed in the listing. One is they're really sticky, I guess, because they're sorbethane. So when you put them down on a shelf or an entertainment center, whatever, it really, really sticks. So if you need to adjust the position of this or lift it up and move it somewhere else, you almost need a crowbar. I mean, it really sticks to the furniture. So that's kind of annoying. The other thing that they don't point out in the listing is they do here on the back card, though. It says, caution, isolated sorbethane rubber contains plasticizers that may discolor surfaces. So in other words, the black color can leach out of this into your furniture, and you won't be able to get it out. So what I did was I just took some ordinary saran wrap, plastic wrap that's used for food, and I cut little pieces and I wrapped them on each foot. So that should stop any color from leaching out, and it prevents it from sticking to the surface, so I can maneuver it around if I need to, or lift it without having to really pry it up. Yet it still gives me the isolation and still gives me the height for more airflow. The other thing I'll point out is here and here are where the transport screws go. This came with screws, but not the original screws, and they had a weird kind of a head that it was almost like it took a hex wrench or something. It required a special kind of a tip, and it was really annoying to have to find this and have it available if I needed to remove the screws. So I went to my local Lowe's and I bought a set of these, which are metric M4 0.7 by 20 panhead Phillips, and they work quite well, and it just takes a regular Phillips head screwdriver. But if you're going to be shipping this at all, or really moving it around, you should install the transport screws. I planned on leaving like one of them in place because when I go to replace the styluses, I don't want to perhaps misalign the arms or maybe break the arms, move them around. And my understanding was at least one of the transport screws holds the arms in place and the other holds the tray in place. And I am going to have to open the tray to get in there and look. So I took this screw out. The tray still wouldn't open. I took this screw out. I put it back in. I put this screw out and the tray still wouldn't open. So both of them hold the tray in place, and one of them, I assume this one, holds the arms in place as well. So I had to remove the transport screws in order to get the tray open. Now, normally, you could go through this port here, and there's a corresponding one on the other side to get at the stylus for cleaning it and replacing it. But I want more room to maneuver. This doesn't give you a heck of a lot of space to get in there. Also, I wanted to just open it up and kind of see how the land lays. I wanted to look in there and see what the condition was, and the seller told me it was in very good condition, that he had replaced the turntable belt and cleaned it up and so on, but I'd like to take a look for myself. I may also replace the plastic gear that's used for the tray to open and close, because the seller said the gear was original, and I'm concerned it may crack because they're prone to cracking, and then the tray won't open or will only partially open. So I may do that. I don't know. We'll see. I hate to replace something if it ain't broken, but we'll see how complicated that looks once we get in there. So I'm going to remove this screw, this one, and then the ones on the bottom, and then there's 3 on the back. So, and I can't really just remove this section, this middle part here, even though this is really the space I'm concerned with inside, because this back cover somehow interlocks with this. I believe it's got tabs or something that slide in. So really you kind of have to take both off. This is plastic, by the way, and this is aluminum. They're not the easiest thing to get off. So what I'm going to do is just stop the video, remove this stuff, and then come back on again once it's opened up, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to do some commentary here. This is the slot I was talking about in the back black plastic piece, that there's a lip on the aluminum cover that slides into that, so they kind of interlock. This center metal piece, I see in a lot of videos people remove that. I'm not removing it. I want to remove as few things as possible, and it's not necessary. This is the black plastic cover I'm going to remove in order to get at the motor, which opens and closes the tray, and then there's just a single screw that holds that in place. And as you can see, I can get at it fine without removing that crossbar, so it's just not necessary, I think. So screw is gone, and now I'm going to pry off that plastic cover, which ends up giving me more of a problem than I expected it. I wasn't quite sure why it was not coming off, considering I removed the only screw that holds it in place. And I realized, I felt down there's like a plastic standoff or a leg that is attached to the metal platform that holds the motor, and I was hoping that it wasn't screwed in from the bottom, because then I wouldn't really know how to get at it. At that point I'd probably have to take the bottom off or something. So when all else fails, you just resort to good old-fashioned brute force. At the same time, though, I'm trying not to break it. I've seen many videos where this piece is missing, and I think that's why. I think the leg just broke off on people. So there it is there. You can see it right there. And there wasn't any screw or anything holding it in. It's just a friction fit. It's a very, very tight friction fit. That little piece on the end sticks into a hole and further holds it in place along with that screw. So there's the motor. And you can see that white plastic wheel and the threaded shaft. And I think that's the point of that plastic cover, so that debris and dirt and dust from the record doesn't fall in there and gunk it all up. There are 3 screws that hold this motor in place, and I'm going to remove those. And once again, you can see I can get at it okay without having to remove that crossbar. Yeah, I guess it would give me a little more room, but again, why create more work for myself? It's just, in my opinion, not necessary. That's screw number 2, and then we go to screw number 3.
and the screw just doesn't seem to want to come out. It's staying there. It's you know, fully removed, but it's not coming off of that metal base. So I'm going to get some needle nose pliers, because I'm afraid it'll just fall off and flop around inside and I'll lose it or something. So I'll just remove it with the needle nose. And you'll see there's that pigtail of wires at the top. That, I guess you could disconnect, unclip. I think it's just like a Molex connector on the end, but again, why go there? I can do it. The space is a little bit tight, but it's not bad. I just don't want to create potentially more issues. So the wheel, that cog wheel thing, is on there really, really tight. I was hoping I could just pull it off with my fingers, but that wasn't going to happen. So I'm using, as you can see here, a flathead screwdriver and just gently pushing up on the ends. And it's really on there. It's a friction fit. You know, there's no set screw or anything. It's just pushed on there, but it's really a very, very snug fit. And I'm going to finish it off with the needle nose pliers. Ta-da! And it looks in really good shape. It's not cracked. There's no damage to it. So, you know, I could have kept it on there, but everybody says this is the first thing that breaks, and then your tray is not going to open or not open properly. Here's the replacement. It's black, so you can tell it's not the original because it's black. Got it on eBay. Not too bad price-wise. And once again, it's a really tight fit. It's I'm struggling to get it on there. It's just a friction fit. I have seen some videos where people put a bead of super glue on the inside of it. I don't understand the point of that. I don't think it's necessary. It's not going to kind of spin on its own. It's a really, really tight fit. I'm not exaggerating. So it's not going to go anywhere. I don't see the point of putting glue on it. And it's just a matter of just pressing it down, making sure it's even, it's not tilted one way or the other. I've got it just very slightly recessed from that exposed metal piece. I think the rule of thumb is 2 millimeters of spacing between the wheel and the base, but it's just slightly recessed. I'm not going to put any grease on it because the white rail that it interfaces with is greased up nicely, so I'm not going to do anything more there. So the wheel is on now, and now I'm going to put the motor piece back in place. And that white wheel with the threaded shaft is also lubed up pretty well too, so I don't need to do anything there. Now you can see I'm having some problems trying to get it to seat flush. It just would not seat flush. There was a metal piece below the motor, a little metal nub thing that was hitting up against the white plastic railing and preventing it from being flush. So what I ended up doing was just pushing the tray back manually just a little bit, and that revealed a routed out spot in that white rail that allowed that metal nub to fit in into that routed out space, which made the motor sit flush at that point. But I didn't realize that at first, and it caused a problem with the unit not playing after I got it all back together again. And so I had to take it all apart again and reseat that motor after I discovered that routed out part. It took me, like, I'm embarrassed to say, like 2 hours to do all of this stuff between that and the styluses. So here's the stylus. This is the one facing up that would play side 2. That's the easy hanging fruit, since it's right there. So you lift it up gently from the front and unlock the little locking tab and back there. So that's the original that's been on there for whatever, 40 years, which is why I wanted to replace it. And you can see this, well, you can't see it very well, but there's a tiny white silkscreen on the front which says Audio Technica, which shows that it is the original stylus. But, who knows what condition that needle is in after 40 years and what damage it might be doing to the grooves in a record. So that really needed to be replaced, and why the owner that I purchased it from didn't do it. I mean, he was in there already lubing things up and cleaning things, so why he didn't do that, I don't understand. This is the aftermarket replacement. It's new old stock. I got it on eBay. I bought 2 of them, and I got a discount for buying 2. I think it was like $13.88 a piece, and I think it was free shipping, so, not bad. I'm just spraying this with some compressed air. That's where the infrared beam emits from, and then there's a sensor which reads the infrared beam, and that's how it tells where the tracks are. But I realized, and you might be able to see it, there's a little clear window there. It's not open. And so now I'm going to replace this. I'm putting in that locking tab in first, and then slide it, or, just okay. Yeah. Well, I'm comparing them to make sure that everything's the same size, and, this is going to fit properly, and so on, which everything is the same. It's all correct. It's not a problem. But that sensor, that little window, I've seen that missing on some videos, and you have to blow away the dirt and debris and dust that falls in from records, but mine still has the clear window. So I put that locking tab in, I'm pushing it down, and now I'm just making sure it's fully seated and level, which it is, nice and secure, and trying to be gentle because, that tone arm can be tricky. And so here's the other side. This plays side 1, so it's on the bottom. It's a little more difficult to get at. I'm going to grab my can of lithium grease and prop it underneath the chassis so I can have my hands free to get at that stylus. So once again, pulling it down from the front, and then unclipping that little locking tab in the back and just gently pulling it away. And you can see on the front, it's got the white silkscreen name, Audio Technica, again, the original. And I think, as I may have said, this, I believe, is the first video that shows this. I could not find any videos on YouTube showing how to replace the styluses or someone replacing the styluses. I don't know why. It was a little bit intimidating, I was just really afraid I was going to ruin the alignment of the tone arms or something. So here's the aftermarket stylus, and I'm just peeling off the back. Never been used, never been opened. New old stock. And no silk screen on the front there, but everything else is the same. And I'm going to stick in that locking piece first, and then lower it into position and snap it in place. Make sure it's nice and secure and level and seated, which it is. And now, time to replace the black plastic cover, making sure that leg sticks into the hole to secure it. And then, once that's in position, I can get that single screw and screw it in at the top. But as I said, this is still with the motor not properly seated. It's not flush. So, and also if you look above that, directly above that plastic housing, the plastic cover, see where the screw is? It's on this sort of vinyl pad that's curved, which I also assume is to protect from dirt and debris and dust from falling in there. But that's got to be seated. It actually goes in the tray. The tray has a slot in it, which is difficult to see because the slot is thin, so it's dark and it's black, and the tray is black. So you've got to align that so it goes into that slot. Otherwise, it's either going to go above the tray or below the tray, and it's going to cause a problem. So those were my two big mistakes. The motor was not flush, and that vinyl strip was not positioned correctly. So after I got everything ready and powered it on and closed the tray and hit play, nothing happened. It wouldn't work. And I couldn't understand why. So I had to take it, open it up again and figure it out. And so hopefully my mistakes, my dumb mistakes, because I wasn't familiar with what I was doing, will save you some time, and it won't take you 2 hours. So I'm putting the record in now. A little tough to do when you have shaky hands like I do. You don't want to scratch the record against something. Pressing the drawer to close. And you see the clamp doesn't go down, which it should. I hit play. The record isn't spinning. The arms aren't moving. And that's because of those two mistakes I made.
So as I said in the video, because of those mistakes I made when I went to test it afterwards, it didn't work. I got lights and things, but nothing worked. So I went back, fixed those problems, tested it again, and the video I'm going to show you now shows it working the way it should. I'm going to roll just a very brief footage of me testing it after I fixed the problems. Roll it. So as you can see, I got things working. I gave myself a slight heart attack after doing everything and then trying to play it. And I got some lights, but nothing happened. Nobody was home. So after I fixed things, tested it, everything worked okay. And that's one thing I'll point out to you, though, that I thought was interesting. I mentioned early on, I felt this sounded quite bright. And once I replaced the styluses, the frequency smoothed out. It became much more balanced. I could hear more mid-range, more bass. It sounded better. Again, hearing and sound quality is subjective, so you may come to other conclusions, but I could hear a definite difference between before and after. And since the aftermarket styluses are supposed to be identical to the original, the only way I can account for this is that the original styluses, since they were over 40 years old, the diamond tips were so worn that they negatively impacted the sound quality. And once I swapped them out to brand new ones, the sound quality improved quite a bit to my ears. So what I'd like to do now is do a little quick demo here of a record. And I'm going to be playing, well, you won't be able to hear it, but I'll be playing this Tony Modola, the Now Sound. I don't have this hooked up to a stereo system, so you won't be able to hear it. But beyond that, copyright. I don't want the copyright police to break down my door and taser me. So, God forbid. So you're not going to hear anything, but at least I can demonstrate some of the functions of this now that it's working properly. What I'm going to need to do, though, is move my way around so I can see the front of it and control some things. So hopefully I don't block your view. So let me grab this record. This record has, I think, is it 6 or 7 tracks? It's got 6 tracks on each side. You can select 7 tracks on this. So if your record has more than 7 tracks, you can't direct access it. I guess you could manually lift the tone arm up and move it over and attempt to play a track, but you're limited to 7 tracks in terms of the numerical buttons, and this has 6. So anyway, let me move my way around here, and then we'll see how well I'm able to do some demonstrations here.
Okay, so let's open the tray. And you'll notice this is a 75 RPM adapter. So if you use a 45 RPM adapter. So if you use a 45 RPM record, a 7-inch record, it's built in already, which is kind of nice. And it recesses. So when you put in a regular 12-inch album on there, it just automatically goes down, so the record is flush. So I got the record in there. Let's close it. I'm pretty sure it's on 33 1/3, although once again, you're not going to hear it, so it doesn't really matter. But there's no indicator, which is kind of annoying. You don't really know what speed it's on until you hear it. So what I'm going to do now, I guess I'll just select side A. Oops, excuse me, it is on side A. Side A is green, side B is a kind of orangey color. And I'm going to select tracks 1, 3, 5, and 6, because there's 6 tracks total. You'll see the corresponding green lights to indicate the tracks. What really would be cool is this thing rotated whenever the record was rotating. If this thing kind of looked like it was rotating, that would have been really neat. But, that's just me revealing my geekiness. So I've indicated the tracks on side A. I'm going to hit play. And you'll see these LEDs lighting up here. What this is doing is the tone arm is moving across the record to scan the entire record, get the lay of the land, figure out where the tracks are. Now it's going to come back to its resting position. You'll see track number 1 flashing. It's going to play track 1. And I don't know if you heard that. There's a little snap, which is the tone arm popping down on the vinyl record. And if you saw that video previously, it really kind of slams down. It's like a hammer coming down. It's not very gentle. It just plops right down on that record. And so it's going to play those tracks in that order. If I change my mind, I don't want to hear track 1 anymore. I want to go on to the next track, which is track 3. I can hit forward, and you see now track 3 is flashing. It will lift up from track 1, find track 3, and this indicates it's on track 3, and the track 3 is flashing. You can repeat, so I can play this over and over again. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go to side B. So I'll hit side B. Well, I'll hit stop first. They call it cut, but it's stop. And it goes back to its resting position. I'll hit side B, which turns orange. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do 1, 3, 5, and 6. And again, the corresponding lights are there. Now I could just hit play, not select tracks, just hit play. It'll play the record normally like any turntable. Now I'm going to hit play. And once again, that tone arm is going to come out and go to track 1 and play it. And track 1 is flashing. And if I change my mind, like I said, let's say I want to go to track 3, I'll hit forward. It'll stop track from playing track 1 and go over and play track 3. And like I said, I can do repeat. There's the repeat icon. Play both sides if I wanted to if I went back to A and selected tracks, then I could hit play both sides, and it would, when it finished one, it would go and do the other. So Q, I can lift up the tone arm and move it back and forth to try and find a track if I wanted to. So lots of flexibility. Very, very interesting technology. And so that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. This is the kind of thing I do on my videos. So if you like vintage audio, vintage albums, vintage audio equipment, subscribe. Leave some comments if you would, some kind comments. Let's be civil. Be kind to each other, and we will see you next time right here on YouTube.